All right, so today we're diving into something, well, kind of personal, even if you've never booked a flight to Europe.
Hmm. Intriguing. I'm listening.
It's Notre Dame.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Right. Like that fire in 2019. It was almost like we all had this collective, no, not that, even if we'd never actually been there.
Absolutely. It was one of those moments seared into everyone's memory, the world kind of just watching in shock.
Exactly. And we've been, pouring over all these analyses of the fire, the reports. And what's really got me hooked isn't just what happened, but like the why.
The so what even? The stuff that sticks with you long after the ashes have settled.
Yes. And get this. It's like the whole thing hinges on this butterfly effect idea, that one tiny change snowballing.
Which, let's be real, in a building 850 years in the making.
Talk about a lot of potential butterflies. And our source really emphasizes this, especially because, well, the fire started during renovations.
Right, which isn't just ironic, it's almost like an invitation for disaster. Because anytime you're dealing with a structure that old, renovation equals risk. But with Notre Dame.
You're talking medieval timbers, wiring, probably older than my grandparents.
Yeah.
And then you're putting all that up against, like, cutting-edge construction tech.
And it's that clash of old and new, trying to make modern safety standards fit into a building where one wrong move could mean erasing history, that adds this whole other layer of complexity.
This is a huge responsibility for sure.
Huge.
And speaking of heavy, the source doesn't shy away from how, well, inadequate the fire safety protocols actually were.
Oh.
Yeah, like one detail that really stuck with me. Workers were on the roof at 6:20 p.m. when the fire started, but the alarm didn't go off for almost an hour.
But an hour.
An hour. It's like, how does that even happen?
It makes you wonder how many other Notre Dames are out there just waiting for this to happen again.
Right. And it's easy to think, oh, old buildings, but this wasn't just an old building. This brings me to my next point. Notre Dame, it was more than bricks and mortar,
Absolutely. A symbol, like the source says, which I think really gets at the heart of why it was so devastating. This wasn't just a fire. It was bigger than that.
Right. Like, what comes to mind for you, listener, when you think Notre Dame? History, art, faith. Probably a little bit of everything, right?
It's fascinating how certain places, they weave themselves into our collective imagination, And Notre Dame, it held so many stories within its walls.
And within those walls, things like the crown of thorns. I mean, talk about an object steeped in history and faith. And the organ, the fact that those things survive.
People were calling it a miracle. And
Yeah.
honestly, when you see the pictures, the scale of the blaze,
Yeah.
that anything survived is incredible. Firefighters, volunteers, risking their lives to save these irreplaceable pieces of history. Art. It's really something.
Talk about putting it all on the line, huh?
Yeah.
It gives me chills just thinking about it. But you know what else is amazing? The global response. This wasn't just France's loss. It felt like the whole world felt it.
It really goes to show the impact of a place like Notre Dame.
And the rebuilding fund, over 800 million euros. People really dug deep for this one.
Which is interesting when you compare it to, say, the Buddhas of Bemiyan. Also a tragic loss, no question. But the global outcry, the financial support, nowhere near the same level.
So what was it about this that struck such a nerve? Was it the timing or the way social media just broadcasted the whole thing? Or was it something else, like a sense of, I don't know, unease, this feeling that if this could happen?
It makes you wonder what we truly value as a global society, doesn't it? Why this disaster, and what does that say about us? Especially in a world where it feels like so much is uncertain, changing so fast.
It's almost like Notre Dame became this mirror, reflecting back all our anxieties about a world where history can literally vanish in a cloud of smoke.
And what's fascinating is even in the rebuilding, those anxieties, those questions about how we move forward, they're still there. Like the debate about the spire, the source really digs into that.
Oh yeah, rebuild it exactly as it was, even if that means using materials that might not be as safe? Or do you go with modern materials, prioritize longevity, even if it means changing history?
It's a tough one, and it gets at this bigger question of what is authenticity, really, especially in the 21st century. It's not enough to just preserve the past. We have to find a way to make it meaningful for right now, for the future.
It strikes me that this butterfly effect, it isn't just about a chain reaction, it's about choices. Even something as seemingly small as delaying a fire alarm installation because, oh, it's complicated, it's an old building.
And those choices can have massive consequences. It makes you think, what are the fires, literally or figuratively, that we could prevent if we were more aware? What are we taking for granted?
It's a question worth sitting with. And on that note, listener, we're going to leave you with this. Notre Dame, the actual building, they're putting it back together, piece by piece. But the real challenge?
Remembering the fire, not just the tragedy, but as a
Catalyst, almost.
Yeah.
For thinking differently, for asking those tough questions, and then actually doing something with the answers.
Because what we learn from those ashes, that's what will illuminate the path forward, not just in preserving our past, but building a future where these kinds of losses hopefully won't happen again.
And on that powerful thought, we'll wrap up this deep dive into Notre Dame. Stay curious out there, everyone.
It's like almost eerie, this one event, and suddenly we're all forced to confront this like deeper unease about, about losing the things we thought would always be there.
And what's so interesting is even as they're rebuilding, those anxieties, they're kind of baked right in. Like the source talks about this whole debate around the spire, and it becomes this whole thing. Oh yeah, like do you go full on historical accuracy, even if it means, maybe using materials that, let's face it, aren't exactly fireproof.
Right. Or do you embrace the modern stuff? Make it safer, longer lasting, even if it means, the new spire isn't exactly like the old one. It's like, what's more important? The look of authenticity or the idea of it?
It's a tough one. And it kind of makes you think about that whole butterfly effect thing in a different light.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like a domino effect, it's choices. Right? Like at some point, someone probably looked at that old fire alarm system and they were like, it'll be fine for now.
And then boom, a whole chain of events set in motion by what might have seemed in the moment like a pretty minor decision makes you think, what are the fires, big or small, that we could be preventing if we applied that same thinking to? Well, everything. Seriously.
It's a lot to chew on. And hey, listeners, speaking of things to chew on, we're going to leave you with this thought. They're rebuilding Notre Dame brick by brick. But what's harder to rebuild is
our memory, like not just remembering the fire happened, but remembering what it taught us, I guess.
Exactly, because if we forget that, then what was the point? Notre Dame, the building itself, might be back. But if we don't learn from what happened,
it'll be like the fire never even happened. And who knows what else we might lose down the line because of it.
Oof. Heavy stuff, but important. So on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive into Notre Dame. Remember, folks, stay curious, keep asking those tough questions.
And most importantly, don't let the lessons we've uncovered today fade away.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Sure.
Until next time.